Hello everybody and welcome back to Norwich Talk for the final episode of our mini-series, The Review. I thought who would be better to get on than Mr. Benjamin Bloom to sort of give an overview from an outside perspective of Norwich City's championship winning season. We're going to be going through the season in its entirety. I've done that in sort of greater detail throughout this series, Ben, just for a bit of context, with some really sort of cool, esteemed Norwich City themed guests. But today you're going to bring a sort of outsider perspective on some very interesting talking points, aren't you? Which I'm very looking forward to diving into. First of all, Ben, how are you?
I'm all right. I had to take a power nap before we did this.
Nice.
So I'm going to be, imagine, I'm going to be like Barnsley during this podcast. I'm going to get gradually better as it goes on. But I'm very, very much looking forward to this because I did your pre-season sort of preamble. And I would quite like Norwich fans to watch that back because I think I had quite a good batting average on that, didn't I, Ben?
You did, and we're definitely going to be talking about that and referencing that constantly because I'm sure you can, and very rightly so, be very smug about the very good predictions. And who would have predicted Norwich City would have won the league this season, apart from us and everyone else?
Most people.
Yeah, exactly. Right, so what we'll do is, I think the first place to start is expectation versus reality. Now, I spoke to Chris Gorham about this in episode 1, which came out a few weeks ago now, for when this video is released. And we spoke a bit about how I think they differed really within Norfolk beyond, as we sort of spoke about on the last podcast. I think everyone expected Norwich to bounce back. Whereas within Norfolk, it is very much this record sort of loss record of streak, whatever you want to call it, something horrible, something I don't like to remember. So within Norfolk, it was very much, can Norwich stop the rot, get a few results? How do you now, and I think this is quite a straightforward and easy question, how do you now sort of reflect on the expectations versus reality debate from the outside?
From the outside, it just looked very obvious. I've spoken to Chris this season, and he used the analogy of, I don't know whether he did with you, of it's all very well having the best Formula One car and the best pit crew. You've still got to get it around the circuit, 46 times in terms of the championship. But look, it's very, very easy to sit from the outside when you're not a supporter of the club and say, that looks like they might have the best squad, best manager, best sporting director, sort of most income, given being a relegated team. And I would always caveat that, Ben, by saying you have to be competent. And Chris Gorham is right with the Formula One analogy. You can have the best car, and if you don't drive it properly, you're going to come off the track and you're going to come a cropper. And maybe you'd look at a team like Stoke, who had the best car perhaps a couple of seasons ago and came off the track and are still going around the track, probably a couple of miles behind where Norwich have been. But yeah, it needed stability and it needed competence, and they delivered that in absolute spades, didn't they?
Yeah, there's a lot of case studies, isn't there, where teams come down. You look at QPR before, Fulham, Sunderland especially, Norwich in, I think it was the 15-16 season when we got relegated, and that was what sparked this sort of Stuart Webber era to really begin and kick off. So I think, credit to Stuart Webber for getting things straight, and Daniel Farke for, as you said, sort of going around the track consistently. I'm not an F1 fan, so I'll leave the F1 references
I'm
alone.
not either. I'm using Chris Gorham's reference.
That's totally fair enough. I think it's quite befitting in that Stuart Webber has made it clear he is a fan of F1. So there you go.
I did not know that. Look, we don't need to let Norwich fans know how brilliant Chris is, do we? Everyone knows that already. Hey?
That's a fact. Now we'll move on to the transfer activity. So it was a very and I struggle to look for a word beyond interesting transfer windows. Compared to the last time Norwich went up, it was, way more active. The last time we went up, we only signed, I think, 3 or 4 players, and there was maybe 2 outgoings. Whereas this time, Norwich had just come down from the Premier League. There were the 5 players, weren't there, that people had outlined: Ben Godfrey, Jamal Lewis, Buendia, Cantwell, and Max Aarons. Max Aarons, by the way, I'm pretty sure on the last pod I kept saying Aarons, so I do apologise for that. But they were the 5, weren't they? And only 2 of them left, which I think is quite impressive, but not really unsurprising, because as a Norwich fan, I'm sure it's the same for you, Ben, from the outside, that Stuart Webber is only going to do a deal if it's right. How do you sort of reflect on the transfer activity, and how important was it to Norwich winning the title?
Well, it's all about bargaining power and leverage, isn't it? And Norwich had lots of leverage and lots of bargaining power, didn't they? They essentially could sit back and pick and choose who they were going to sell. And it seemed like the plan was to try and supplement the parachute payment with some transfer income from one or two of those players you have just mentioned. And I suspect if you polled most Norwich fans, they wouldn't have wanted to lose any of the players, but you have to, don't you? You have to when you come down. You've got to balance up the books. I suspect if you polled most Norwich fans, those two you mentioned would have been the two that they would have sold on the basis that we've seen Aaron's Buendia, Pukki, and you mentioned Cantwell as well, just dominate this division before, and particularly they play down the same side of the pitch, don't they, as well? So they were in such a strong position. It does a little bit come from the fact that they only had one season in the Premier League. So they were very judicious, some would say overcautious in the Premier League. But what that meant is they came down without massive liabilities that they had to quickly shift and get rid of. They came down in a good position. We said on your preview show, this was all the plan, wasn't it? To be strong in this position. And the comparison I've made is Bournemouth, obviously been up for a lot longer, so they had to build up liabilities and bills and things of that nature in the Premier League. And Bournemouth selling Ake, Ramsdale and Wilson would have been the equivalent of Norwich selling Aaron's, Buendia and Pukki. Norwich didn't have to do that because they'd only been up the one season. They were financially in a strong position because of the sacrifices they'd made, which was some pain, wasn't it? It was, whatever you want to call it, a 12 games losing streak. But Stuart Webber's been playing the long game, hasn't he? And now they're in a position going into his fifth year where they're much, much stronger. And we suspect, I'm sure we'll touch on this, we suspect the transfer deals will look very different this summer going into the Premier League than they did the last time. But in terms of the sales, I think they absolutely nailed it, didn't they? They needed to raise some money, not lose too much quality, and let's be honest, not lose Buendia. And that's turned out to be the absolute best thing, was the non-sale of a player. So
yeah, we'll definitely be speaking about Buendia towards the end and just sort of the madness that he is. You made a few points there that I want to pick up on. One being this word sacrifice. And I think from the outside especially, you know, expectation versus reality, I'll bring that up again in that from the outside, I think Norwich's catastrophic end to the Premier League season made a few people think, oh, this could go very badly for them. Whereas on the inside, there was stability, wasn't there? This idea of that before Stuart Webber had come in, the finances were sticky, they were messy, they were all over the place, and he was very vocal about that. He was very open and transparent about that. And then you compare it to the Premier League summer transfer window where we spent £650,000, the second lowest. Yeah, that was about it. Wow. It was on Sam Byram as well. Which is bizarre, isn't it? But from the inside, again, it's the idea that the money that we gained from going up was paying off debts, improving, for example, the training ground, etc., etc. And that word, again, I'll bring it up, sacrifice, is essentially what it was. And you mentioned this Stuart Webber plan. It's always been labelled as a 5-year plan. We're now in year 5. We're in the Premier League. And the finances are looking great. The training ground's looking great. We've got some really good, promising young players who, if they stay, will develop well in the Premier League. If they don't, will make us lots of money to replace with. And Norwich have been so good at replacing players over the years, but especially since Stuart Webber's been here, and that's such an important part of it. Now, I do want to sort of do a deep dive into sort of the Buendia-Cantwell situation, because I am genuinely interested to know how this was perceived from the outside, whether it was just sort of your typical young, talented players being tattered with moves away, or did you look into it a bit deeper, maybe? At the beginning of the season, I mean.
Yeah, so when I did my actual review of Norwich's promotion, I made the turning point in Norwich's season, which was very early in the season, which kind of speaks to 97 points, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Was the press conference after the Bournemouth game. I'm sure you've done it to death, but I think and there's a lot of speculation in me saying this. I'm not in the boardroom. I'm not in the dressing room, but this is just my perception from kind of watching from afar. That in an ideal world, Buendia and Cantwell, from their point of view, would have agitated for a move. But I've said Norwich were in a very, very strong bargaining position. They had leverage, and they particularly had leverage over those players. The second Jamal Lewis and Ben Godfrey went out the door, they just didn't have to sell them. The only thing that would require Norwich to have sold those players is they've been massively short of money, which they weren't. They'd sorted it with the other sales. B, the contracts had been poorly structured, and we've got to sell now, else he's going to go for nothing. Or C, a hissy fit from the player, and I'm not playing. I'm down in tools. I'll never play for you again. But Norwich called their bluff basically, and neither, and they basically said to them, "Look, you're not going. You're especially Buendia. You are worth £100 million to us if you stay, because you're so much above the level of the Championship. You've already carried one promotion on your back. Would you please do it for us again?" And look, we don't know what handshakes have been done. We think maybe one's been done with Max Aarons in the background. We don't know what handshake has been done in the background. You remember famously Ferguson and Ronaldo, "Give me one more season and I'll let you go to Madrid." We don't know whether that's been discussed with either Buendia or Cantwell. Maybe it has with Aarons and not with the other two. But I think they played it really, really well. And I think it's a lot of us football fans, we get a bit grumpy with footballers when they make loads of money and they're living out our dream and then they agitate for a move away. I think most football fans are kind of quite pleased to see Norwich go, "Well, no, Mr. Star Player, you're staying, get on the pitch, play football." I was there. I was in the stadium at the Derby County game when Buendia came back, and he was behaving like an absolute crazy man on the pitch and then slamming the seats as he got substituted. He just needed a few weeks to accept whatever was going on and get his head down. And of course, when he got his head down, essentially a top half elite league player playing in the second tier of a country's league. And Cantwell had done so well in the Premier League last year. And I thought Cantwell was great as well during the second half of this season. So yeah, good strict sort of hardball played by Norwich, but I'm fully behind that sort of thing.
Yeah, do you know what? That's really interesting to me that you mentioned how maybe other fans were beyond Norwich were like, "Yeah, do you know what, Mr. Starman? No, you're not going to get what you want." That's really interesting. That's not really how I perceived it. Mine was just genuine crippling fear of losing Emi Buendia.
Please don't go.
Yeah, but that was precisely it. And I remember I made a video. I think it must have been before our podcast. I made two videos, both entitled "Should we sell Todd Cantwell? Should we sell Emi Buendia?" The Buendia one, to sum it up within 5 seconds, no, we really shouldn't. The Todd Cantwell video was, yeah, I think we should, maybe we should, because I didn't personally know how much I trusted him to develop, etc., at Norwich. And, there's a reason I'm not Norwich City's head coach, in that Daniel Farker, and Chris said this on his podcast, on episode 1, he will not get enough credit for that sort of choice he made and the way he played that out, and the reaction he got.
He loves Cantwell, Ben, as well.
He does, yeah. He definitely does. And do you know what? Daniel Farker's made a thing of it throughout his Norwich City career. His first game at Norwich, he was thrown into the deep end when it came to player attitudes. I don't know if you remember this, but I think it was August 2017. We drew away with Fulham.
You're going to say Nelson Oliveira,
and Nelson Oliveira whips his shirt out in front of him, starts dangling it in front of him, whatever, and then goes on to be isolated for the rest of the season.
And Ben, you've got to give Farker a lot of credit for that, because that was a £7 million player.
A very good player.
Do you know what I mean? And it was, this is before everyone knew what was going to happen with Farker and Webber and the next batch of recruitment. But he was right.
Yeah, do you know what? It was like the ultimate power move, wasn't it? And I think maybe at the time some people perceived it as, oh, it's just Daniel Farker flexing his muscles. No, it was him just making the right decision. And that is what 4 years later we've learned Daniel Farker seems to often do, make the right decision. He does, and I admire it. And something that I find quite interesting as well, just about that, is I was listening to Hodgie's podcast, Hodgie the Hack, and he was talking to Alex Neil, and Alex Neil said, I think one of the most talented players he'd worked with was Nelson Oliveira. So
That's
again,
right.
that just adds another layer, doesn't it, to that whole story. And we know from the previous season how good he was, but that's just Daniel Farke to a T. Now, you mentioned the Derby loss, which accumulated a bit of anger within me, to be honest with you, a bit of frustration. But I also said to Chris, he said the same thing in terms of this idea of the performance, and you were there, so you saw it yourself. The
It
performance
was a
from
very
Norwich,
unlucky defeat.
yeah,
The
it wasn't that
star
bad.
striker fell over from a penalty, and then
Exactly.
England's all-time top scorer banged a free kick in the last minute of the game. It was one of those where if you look at the underlying numbers, if you'd played it 15 times, Norwich would have won it 14 times, and we got the one occasion where you could kind of feel it. You must have been in stadiums before, Ben, where the home team's not scoring, and you know when that penalty goes over the bar,
Smash and grab, innit?
like if they go in the other half, they're definitely scoring, aren't they? And then of course when it was Rooney, you know his technique's so good, don't you? But yeah, it was. I always use the term viable. People take the mick out of me on my channel. It wasn't a viable win from Derby's point of view, let's say. And you can see where the two teams ended up. That we were right about that as well.
Yeah, it's a bizarre one, isn't it? And I look at the results here in front of me. Norwich had just been knocked out of the cup, albeit a D team rather than a B or C team, because of the international break. We'd just about beaten Huddersfield. We'd drawn at home to Preston. We'd lost to Bournemouth. There was a weird sort of atmosphere, wasn't there? And I think that sort of extended beyond Norwich, to be honest with you. But as we say, that Derby game was just a weird one. It was a smash and grab. And you say, I must have experienced that. Me and 27,000 others in the Premier League a couple of seasons ago experienced that almost every week, where Norwich City should have won games, but just couldn't. So it's really interesting the stuff you say there. Now, following that was a pivotal win against Rotherham. Now, Connor Southwell spoke about this in great depth on that episode as well, in terms of this idea of it was used as a springboard, and the old footballing cliche was whipped out by Daniel Farke of, yeah, it's something we can build on. Now, with the beauty of hindsight, Norwich City did build on it. They went on to win the league. But how important was that win and the following sort of 10 games? Because that 10-game unbeaten streak was a weird one in that Norwich got the results, which was something they hadn't done in the Premier League. They sort of ground out the results and maybe sometimes went against the grain within games, but they couldn't score more than a goal or two in games. How do you sort of reflect on that? Do you think that was just a case of just getting results?
I think sometimes in football that you do the good work and the results come a little bit with a delay.
That's exactly what Connor said. That is exactly what he said.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I agree with Connor then. And if you look, that week, Norwich got 9 points. They won in the last minute against Rotherham. They won late against Birmingham. And they won very late against Wickham as well. And many of us from the outside had our fingers burnt by looking at Norwich in 18-19 and late goals and deflections and thinking, lucky so-and-sos. And then you get a bit further down and you're like, no, there's a pattern emerging here. And I think it was Buendia settling. I think it was the transfer window closing. And it's just quality in the end, isn't it? It's that they hadn't clicked into third gear, fourth gear. Did they ever hit fifth gear this season? Maybe against Huddersfield, maybe against Cardiff. I thought they were really, really good against. I know we'll get to these games, but I just think it was the quality. Remember, the pattern of play is 3 years old now. And the muscle memory of Krul and Aarons, and if Zimmerman is still there, McLean's been there a long time. Skip's very good. Buendia is Buendia. And at that point, Pukki hadn't even really started rolling in the way that we know he can when his finishing's really, really on point. So I think they were almost cashing in. You used the term sacrifice, cashing in the chips that they'd stored up from keeping the quality, keep the manager, keep the pattern of play. And look, it got 94 points last time, and you've added, depth to the squad and kept the star players. So it just felt to me like, okay, they're rolling. Here we go.
Yeah, it's absolutely right, isn't it, from Daniel Farker when he says it was a springboard for them to sort of bounce off and grow. And you mentioned there, Teemu Pukki wasn't even, firing on all cylinders yet. I'll just give a little special mention to my little Finland top here.
How is he? How's the injury?
It's a bit of a dark one. I know McLean is definitely out, which is a tragedy for him, and I believe that the intention behind sort of Teemu Pukki's injury at the moment is to just get him out on the pitch for Finland. There are doubts, is what I'll say, from what I've been told anyway.
Yeah.
And I know he would be like, it would be soul crushing for him because apparently, and Chris said this, he's been like talking about it for ages, and he, every time he speaks about it, there's a smile on his face. And we, as Norwich fans who watch him every week, we love him and we know what a lovely guy he is. So if he was to miss the Euros, that would be...
It blows, Ben. Even as football fans, it's your country, it's an international tournament, it's your career. Yeah. And what is he, 30?
He's no spring chicken. He's in his 30s now,
yeah. Yeah, he's at his peak, isn't he?
Yeah, it is such a tragedy. It is, yeah. And the Finland manager, I remember... I don't know if he said this at the end of the Premier League season or the beginning of this one, but he spoke about how Pukki needed to be at a better club. Thankfully for that Finland manager, he didn't move away from Norwich and he scored 25 goals in the league. I remember there was discussions between Norwich fans, some fan channels as well, where they said he's not going to be a 20-goal plus striker, but very willingly I stuck my neck out and said he will be, because for me personally, now I want to ask you about him in general in a couple of points, but for me personally, he is without doubt the most intelligent striker I've ever seen play for Norwich. I'm not going to say my favourite because Grant Holt will always have my heart in that regard. But Teemu Pukki...
I saw Craig Bellamy and Chris Sutton play for Norwich. just to gazump you.
yeah. Okay. I'll stick my hands up and say, maybe I'm a bit too young for that. I remember I surprised Chris Gorham when I said I was too young to remember Rob Green. Apparently that makes me. I
saw Rob Green's debut.
Okay, I'm sorry I didn't. But yeah, Teemu Pukki for me, absolutely the most intelligent. Now, this is something. So before I get you to maybe give a monologue on Teemu Pukki, because as a football fan you can appreciate his intelligence. There was an interesting period for Norwich where it kicked off against Stoke, where we won 3-2 away from home, and within that game, in the first half, that was I think the second time we'd seen flashes of Norwich City excellence, where we absolutely blew them out of the water. There was that fantastic Pukki goal from that Buendia assist, and then Tim Krul got injured. Emi Buendia gets sent off, and from there things started to look a bit stale, I believe is the right word. We drew to Coventry with Marco Stiepermann up front, so that's never going to end well. We then lost to Luton, but in terms of the impact on
loads of injuries,
and loads of injuries
in that Luton game, didn't
Yeah, the people speak about, and when I say people, it's myself included, that Premier League injury crisis that started against Manchester City. I think the peak of that was 11 first-teamers out, whereas this time around it was 14, 15. How do you sort of perceive that injury crisis and those names specifically, Krul and Buendia's suspension?
Just to quickly touch back on Pukki, the really, really interesting thing is I still think we need to reserve judgment how Pukki does with or without Buendia as well, because it's such a brilliant link up between the two, isn't it? But what I really respect about Pukki, and going to do a clanging name drop, I spoke to Kevin Phillips on my channel, and he spoke about if you could at all times, low, doesn't need power, low, early, and in the corner. And Pukki just sometimes I see him go through, and I'm like, he's barely even hit it hard, but so early, and you can see the practice that's been done on. I assume he practices it just finding the side netting over and over again, and it proves that it's the most spectacular thing in the world when you see a striker go through and just smash the ball in the top corner full power. But we've already mentioned Cristiano Ronaldo, someone who can find the corner and completely lash it at the same time. But we're in different levels there. But no, I really, really do respect Pukki. And it also, I've used him many, many times to debunk the ludicrous argument that lots of football fans have, that the more strikers you have on the pitch, the more attacking you need to be. And I'm sort of like, well, no, it's pattern of play. And if you've got a finisher at the end of a good system, stick one striker on and feed him. But sorry, Ben, rambling. With regards to the injury crisis, look, I had a lot of fun with Norwich fans going back and forth. Particularly the idea that you could have 14 first-team players, because I only thought you could have 11. But that was just me being very, very facetious. Look, they had the squad this year to cope better than... Okay, look, they still lost to Luton and drew with Coventry, didn't they? They had the squad to cope better than most people would have. That's due to their, good work in the past and, a Premier League relegation and being able to strengthen. And I always class an injury crisis, not how many, but who. And if you take someone like Reading, where they had Lucas João, Omar Richards and John Swift injured at the same time, that would kill Reading. Whereas Norwich, Aaron's never got injured and Buendia never got injured and Pukki never got injured. And we keep saying those three. I dare say if you stuck some workaday players around those three, you're most of the way up the table anyway, aren't you? But no, I thought they were unlucky to get the injuries at the same time. But let me ask you as a Norwich fan, would you rather have 8 players injured for 2 weeks or Buendia injured for 6 weeks?
That number could have been 16, 17, 18, and the answer would be the first one. Yeah, if Buendia got injured, right. that would break.
Not that we want to see anyone getting injured, of course, but
no, you're absolutely right. In that run, I think Pukki did get injured for a couple of games, which is why we couldn't score. Yeah, Marco Stephen.
But still, sorry, Ben, the output of those guys, Aaron's in particular, just incredible, just so consistent, so fit, and Buendia as well. Just the only time he's out is when he gets himself red carded, isn't it? And Pukki the same, just so durable. They've been such exceptional players for Norwich, those three.
Yeah, I'll be asking you about Buendia towards the end, and we'll definitely be talking about his, I think his 4 red cards he's now got at Norwich, which is it's quite a little collection he's got going, and I'm sure he'll be adding to it at some point in the future if he's to stay at Norwich. Beyond Norwich, I'm sure he'll get another at some point. But Max Aarons, quickly, I haven't said this on any videos yet, but Max Aarons' development this season has been sort of really under the radar for me, and one that's because he's really good and we're just used to it.
So high, yeah.
He has, yeah, exactly. And we've seen a different type of Max Aarons this season, in that in his first season, maybe not so much in his first Premier League season, because again, he was, 19 at the time. He was always going around the outside. It was always get the ball out wide to him, let him put a ball in. Whereas this season, it was pick the ball up from deep, come inside, and be a lot more confident. And for me, that speaks volumes about his personal development as a person as well, in terms of confidence. And that's why he's a 35, 40 million pound player for me. And I just wanted to get that in there about Max Aarons, because I hadn't planned to speak about him, but he's Norwich's star man.
Ben, I hope that, and not in a arrogant way from Aarons or Farker or whatever, I hope someone had the conversation, look, work on your attacking this season. Do you know what I mean? You're going to be, if you stay here, you're going to be defending next season. And let's be honest, he's worthy of playing for a club that has lots of possession at the top level as well, isn't he? I think he's a brilliant player, absolutely brilliant player.
Absolutely.
There's not really, okay, could be a few inches taller, but really?
Yeah, I was going to say, you sound like Jose Mourinho. You can't help that. Well, exactly. Yeah. You sound like Mourinho when he said, I don't know if he said it, but I think it was reported, and I'm putting my faith in the internet here, in that he didn't want to, a very risky thing to do. But I think he said something about him not being tall enough for him to sign. But then you look at Spurs and they've got Doherty and Serge Aurier, which, I'll leave that one alone. We'll leave Spurs alone.
And the lad at Swansea, Roberts, is no height as well. And both him and Aarons have just been Britain as well for Barnsley. Some got Firmino for Watford, actually, some really good right backs. And you need to take it as a compliment. I always hear Norwich fans whining that Daniel Farker never wins Manager of the Month. Take it as a backhanded compliment that we never notice Max Aarons being brilliant, because he's just really good all the time.
Yeah, do you know what? Would that Norwich fans sort of moaning about Farker not winning Player of the Month? I think there's a group that I'm part of where we're glad he doesn't, because it's always a curse for Norwich. The following month, after the manager wins it, he goes and has a terrible month. Whereas, I'm a bit more glad that he won Manager of the Season. But again, we'll speak.
I'm sure he'd rather have his league title winners medal, wouldn't
Yeah.
he? Hey, there we go. There we go. All you manager of the month winners. I got one of these. Hey.
I mean, that's what it's about, isn't it? And you're absolutely spot on there. Now, I think we'll speak about Pukki. If there's anything else you'd like to add about Teemu Pukki, because the game I'll reference, in terms of like just a general reference point to him to bring him up naturally, is Blackburn away. Norwich won. I think it was 2-1 that day. Pukki grabbed a brace. I'm pretty sure as well, by the way. I remember I asked on Twitter, NCFC numbers, Steve Saunders, I asked him, surely he's got to be, on some sort of record of championship braces for Norwich. And I believe at that point it was tied with Ewan Roberts. So since then, I think he might have broken that record. The guy, until, as you referenced earlier, Huddersfield at home, he couldn't get a championship hat-trick. So in terms of championship braces, he had an absolute plethora. But his goals against Blackburn marked, I think it was 50 in 100, which is a 1 in 2
Brilliant.
in the league, which is...
Is that in all divisions? That's including the Premier League as well? Or is that just a championship?
No,
he wouldn't have played 100.
Yeah,
he wouldn't have played 100. That's superb, isn't it?
Which it's ridiculous, isn't it? And I can't remember now. I feel like a wally because I tried to make a point of this on another podcast, but there was a graphic that came up during a game, and it was since Teemu Pukki has signed, this we're talking I think 2 or 3 months ago, since Pukki had signed for Norwich, which is summer 2018, only Adam Armstrong, I think it was Adam Armstrong was in second, in terms of league goals scored in the Championship. And Teemu Pukki had been in the Premier League for a season, and I think he was on 40-something at the time, and Armstrong was 15, 20 goals below him, which is just like... It's ridiculous.
You realise Billy Sharp's back now, and he'll just take your 50 goals and go away. No, he's been. I mean, was 29 and now 25. Yeah. That's superb. You just wouldn't want him to get labelled as your championship go-to guy, and I'm sure you're going to have the conversation about Premier League. Can he do the business? How many goals did he get? Did he get double figures in the Premier League?
He hit 11, but I believe 6 of those
decent.
were in August and September.
11's 11 though.
Oh no, no, absolutely. Yeah. I'm totally in that camp. Absolutely.
And let's be honest, the team was dreadful for the last.
That's exactly why.
4 months of the season as well. So no, he seems a thoroughly nice chap. He's like you say about intelligence. He's not. Let's be honest, he's not relying on his God-given size, speed, or whatever. It's all technique and practice, and they say good coaching is hiding your weakness and accentuating your strengths. Don't boot the ball up to him and expect him to, have him as your pressing trigger, have him running and intelligent runs, good finishes, and he gets the goals, doesn't he? Great striker.
Yeah, he also gets back a lot on defence, which I really love, and that's sort of the hard-working bit I love about him. That's why I think I love him as a bloke, in that he cares about the team, and it's such a weird thing to be proud of that. But with modern football, sometimes
very English thing, isn't it?
It's a very English thing. As I sit here with a Finland top on, which is just bizarre. It's got Pukki on the back, but I won't turn around and show you that. But I honestly, I love the fact that he gets back, and I remember. Again, the dates I can't remember, but Norwich beat Newcastle 3-1 in their opening day of the Premier League season, and Teemu Pukki, there was sort of the parallel between him and Joe Linton. Joe Linton, a £40 million player who was having a nightmare of a game, and then you've got Teemu Pukki, the free signing, the guy scoring the hat-trick, getting back in the 85th minute of a game to make a tackle when we're 3-0 up. It's one of the many reasons I absolutely love Teemu Pukki. Now, we're going to move on to what I'm going to call the crisis point of Norwich City's season. Now, for context...
97-point crisis.
For context, this is 2 draws and a loss. This is the crisis point of Norwich City's season, in my opinion. I genuinely mean that. I'm obviously sort of exasperating it a bit, but at the same time, goodness me, it compared to the rest of the season, it definitely was. And I think it might have been you, it might have been someone, I think it was you I asked on a live stream, and I was like, Norwich haven't got Buendia at the moment. They're in the mud because he'd picked up a red card against Borough in the first draw of the crisis. And I was kind of worried that Norwich were going to fall off a little bit. I think after the Swansea loss, Brentford went into first. How do you reflect on that now, other than just maybe laughing at people like me?
Well, we have a joke on my streams I watched The Last Dance like you probably did with the Michael Jordan documentary, and I don't know much about American sport, and I was told that apparently the game of basketball is, and NFL to a certain point with the quarterback, is about the individual because there's only, is there 5 or 6 players on a team?
Five on a basketball team, yeah.
Right, there you go. That one player could dominate and carry a team on his back. And obviously Michael Jordan is, I don't know basketball, but the best basketball player of all time. And we started looking up Emi Buendia's points per game with Norwich, and Norwich's points per game without Emi Buendia. And it was actually frightening, hilarious, so with him, up to this point, I know they won without him, didn't they, against Nottingham Forest later in the season, where it was hilarious. We saw the teams come out for that, and all the Norwich fans on my chat were like, right, we'll lose. He's not playing. I think his wife had a child.
He had a baby,
something.
Yeah,
right. But it was, and I'd just love to see this tested out a bit more, but it's something like when at that point, when he played for Norwich, it was like 2.37. Like,
I have the stats in front of me here.
Not good, like outrageous,
Ridiculous.
like 115 points. And without him, literally less than a point per game, relegation form. It was that incredible. Have you got the stats?
Yeah, so stats without him. So this would have been just after the Borough game, maybe the Millwall game. And it was 6% win ratio without him, 49% with, 96 games with him, 16 without. And also had some stat here which said about less touches in the midfield and final third when he doesn't play, which is ridiculous. And then you've got I compared him to Max Aarons in terms of their partnership, which you mentioned earlier. And I remember saying, and I'm quite smug about this, about halfway through, maybe towards the end actually of the first championship winning season under Daniel Farker, I said without Buendia, Max Aarons I don't think would have had such a fun season. He went down to 0.16 chances created from 0.7. And I think it was like 1.4 runs into the box compared to 3 with Buendia there. And the stats are just like, it's ridiculous. And he scored, I think 42% of goals this season he's had a direct involvement in.
I was shocked. I thought, okay, they'll go from being, a 90-point team to a 65-point team, and they'd be just missing out on the playoffs or something. But it was like a 90-point team down to a 40-point team or something ridiculous. But it's one of those ones, Ben, where it's not very hard we don't need to be NCFC numbers or whatever. Most people who've watched more than one game of football in their life can understand that, who's the guy over on the right there? He's very good, isn't he? No one can get near him. And yeah, there's a Supertramp, a prog band from the 70s, have an album called Crisis What Crisis. And the Michael Jordan theory was tested when the best player got suspended, best player in the division, frankly, as well. Yeah. Got suspended. And then how many straight wins did they get when he came back?
It was unhealthy how many wins. It was kind of, do you know what? Despite the fact we were winning, it was kind of worrying, wasn't it? It begs the question, which again I'll ask you: what did Norwich do without him? But as a Norwich fan, what I'll do is I'll go and sit in the corner of my room in a minute and just sort of rock backwards and forwards, saying he's never going to leave. He's never going to leave.
Well, you'll be what I've said jokingly is goodbye, Mr. Buendia, from my Championship channel point of view. If I ever see you again, something has gone drastically wrong, mate, or you have got the worst agent in world football, because it's like a A-level. I'd liken it to an A-level student going and playing with the primary school kids at lunchtime. It's like, what are you doing here? You're just going to score 6 goals every game, aren't you?
Well, I was going to say, maybe he likes that. Maybe he just loves the Championship because it's too easy for him. Now, you mentioned the winning streak, and it was 9 games, which was equaling a club record. And sadly, we couldn't beat it. 10 obviously would have been beating it, but I think it was an 88th minute equaliser from Blackburn in the home fixture there, which stopped that from happening, which I couldn't care less about. Norwich just kept winning. Now, we'll speak a bit about, I think, the Stoke game at home. Again, Norwich had a lot of joy against Stoke this season. That was straight after the Swansea game. I don't know if you watched that game, specifically the Stoke home game, but In terms of turning it round, what do you think it took for Norwich, or was it? Do you know what? Maybe I'll rephrase this question because in my head I'm just thinking
You
the
know what
answer
the
is
answer's gonna
Buendia
be.
came back.
Yeah,
Beyond
right.
Buendia coming back, what else do you think Daniel Farker did, or maybe thought about doing differently? Was there anything beyond Buendia, or was it that
No.
simple?
Was that the game where Buendia scored the volley where the ball was clipped in from the right and he
No, that
watches
was
it over?
Barnsley.
Oh, that was Barnsley, was it? I
You can
distinctly
speak
remember
about
him
that if you
doing.
like. I very much like that goal.
I distinctly remember him doing something stupid in that game because I remember doing a stream going, "Oh, okay, Buendia's back. Norwich winning 4-1 again." Blindingly obvious. No, I suspect Mr. Farker, who's been very good at this sort of thing, just said, "No, we know the plan. We've missing." And I'm sure they don't refer to it because you've got to keep other players' morale and spirits up. You don't want this idea that one of your players is. All the Norwich players know it. All the Norwich fans know it. Daniel Farker knows it, but it's very much. I'm sure he backed the players that came in and played when he wasn't there. But yeah, it was just to get back to the plan and get the best team on the pitch. By the way, I don't know if my timelines are bang on, Ben, but that was the point where it was now. So Pukki, Buendia and Cantwell had sort of nailed down the left. But so you've got two very flamboyant players, a good finish. And I'm not sure Dowell was back at that point. I think Lucas Rupp had played a lot of games at 10, hadn't he? But because that's very different than Buendia, Stiepermann, Hernandez and Pukki. And I think it's better. I think it's a better balance. Stiepermann was very funny, wasn't he? And a very unique player. But
Yeah.
I think with the physicality from Dowell and Cantwell's, I can't think of a better word than flamboyance. I like that. I like the balance of that a little bit better. And Hernandez, they've good servant, but they've upgraded there, haven't they?
Yeah, that's been the thing about Norwich, isn't it? Sort of upgrading. I've spoken about this many times, and we will, until I'm blue in the face. You look at Jamal Lewis, Ben Godfrey. Norwich fans would take them back in a heartbeat, but equally we wouldn't now because you've got Dimitris Giannoulis, who for me is really good. Like, Jesus, man, he is very,
I haven't
very
seen
good.
him too much
Have you
actually,
not?
so I'll
He's one to
reserve.
look out for.
Yeah, I'll reserve. I know he was, and it's going to be a big fee that goes. I think it's going to be 6-7 million quid,
Six
isn't it?
6.5, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure if they're dropping that kind of money on the left back, that's a good player.
Yeah, he it was weird with him specifically because you've got the Liverpool Greek left back Tismakis. I don't know his name, but he's the one who went to Liverpool, and obviously Liverpool are a much bigger club, and the Greek fans were saying they thought Giannoulis was better, which is bizarre because Norwich got him for less money, which is absolutely fascinating. Ben Gibson, again, another example of Ben Godfrey, who I was looking at, and forgive me for my source here, the Sport Bible on Instagram of all things, and it was who was the best signing of the summer window, and Ben Godfrey was on that list, so he's obviously
nice.
really good. It's just that in that position, in the context, the key word there, Ben, being context, Ben Gibson was a marked improvement. So Norwich's ability to replace players has been
they needed physicality and they needed experience,
yeah,
didn't
just
they?
veteran heads.
And a left footer. And look, we've seen Fulham did it with Knockaert and Cavaliero, and Leeds did it with Harrison, and they wish they did it with Ben White as well. This the teams that can pay the wages at the top with the landscape financially, these loan but obligation to buy, they're sensible deals, aren't they? And you can get a player that, you're in FFP trouble if you're buying Ben Gibson for 10 million quid or whatever it would cost. But yeah, just sensible. And we had this joke when Norwich were in the Premier League, they've got 150 million quid's worth of defenders and they're absolutely dreadful at defending.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
But they just needed a, sticker. I always remember it, and this will be the only Ipswich reference I do, but Titus Bramble, I know he gets derided, but believe me, when he was 17, 18, he was frightening unless he didn't have Tony Mowbray, who was 35, stood right next to him, do you know what I mean? Just talking. Sometimes a young player, just and whether it's, I don't know, Alex Tettey or whoever, Norwich don't really have that player, do they? Well, I suppose it's Tim Krul, isn't it? But there's only so much you can do from between the posts, isn't there?
Yeah, you look at Godfrey. I'll mention what you've said there in terms of this idea of that voice next to you, sort of that stable voice. That's the word, isn't it? Stability. Ben Godfrey didn't have that in the Premier League. You look at week in, week out, it would be Amadou, it would be Tettey, it would be Zimmerman, it would be Hanley. And with that changing constantly, it's very disruptive. And as you mentioned there, it was bizarre that Norwich had millions upon millions of pounds of value within the defence, but
of potential, yeah.
Of potential, yeah. Well, that's the key word, isn't it? Potential. But it was Norwich's worst season ever, and it's just, it blows the mind, doesn't it? Now I'm looking at this. This 9-match winning streak, 11 matches unbeaten it was in the end, and that for me was when Norwich got into third gear, then into fourth, and as you said, I don't know if we ever hit fifth, which is bizarre, isn't it? But for a person who's watched pretty much every game, one game that I did miss, we'll speak about in a minute, which is kind of hilarious, but also quite sad. You look at those results, and beyond, I think maybe Birmingham away, maybe Wickham away as well, Norwich deserved all of those points completely. Birmingham away was a struggle. Wickham away, quite interestingly, and I'll point the viewers listening and watching to the direction of our interview with Daniel Farker's assistant, Eddie Reamer. He says that I think the most satisfying tactical change is Wickham away, where things weren't going right for Norwich. They made the change, then went and dominated them. Wickham, a team who I have a lot of admiration for. They did a really good job this season, and I'm sure with the whole...
22nd, yeah, wow.
Yeah, well, only a point away from safety as well, which I think the situation for them was it was just all a bit too late, wasn't it? But yeah, Wickham, again, just a random bit of admiration for them. But in that winning streak, it was just ridiculous, and the football was attractive, it was slick, it was beautiful. And the game that I referenced that I missed, which is going to make you laugh, it was Huddersfield, the 7-0 victory. I missed that game. It was because I was on Dereham Town duty for a friendly that we were late to anyway. Like, we got there and I sat down and Robert was like, "Oh, Norwich are 5-0 up," and I'm like, "Oh, I've only been playing for 30 minutes."
5-0 at half time or something. Yeah,
it was outrageous. It took me back to now I don't know if Simeon Pickup will be watching of the Tilehurst end, but if he is.
Oh, you beat Reading 7, didn't you?
We did, yeah, and I do like to mention this to him on the regular. And it took me back to then, and it was ridiculous. Just talk to me about that Huddersfield game and just how ridiculous it was.
Far be it for me to stand up for Norwich, but you're talking about third gear, fourth gear. I do actually feel a bit sorry for Norwich when people say, 18-19, and yeah, it was thrilling, and they scored 90 goals or whatever it was. I can't remember how many goals they scored, but lots of goals.
96.
And 96 in 46 games, incredible. But this season, how many low blocks did they come up against? Everyone knew what they were getting this season. So look, I did that Wickham game as a watch along, and as a dispassionate observer, I was never at any second of that game in any doubt that Norwich were gonna win it. It's just a matter of going with the process. And you say a little tweak at half time, but yeah, the Huddersfield game, and I could find the text on my phone. My Norwich supporting friend Russ, who's very supportive of my channel, I'd messaged him about 3 months before, and he was saying the same thing as you, but we never win by a single goal. It's not convincing. I said, look out, Huddersfield at home, they'll play really open. The manager won't low block, and at that time of the season, I think you'll batter them. And
is that genuine? Is that a text that you can find? If you can find it, maybe after, but if you send it to me, I'll put it up on the screen now.
Keep talking. I'll try and find it.
Yeah, that Huddersfield game for me was just like it was sad really because I missed it, but it was absolutely ridiculous. And I think the best thing about that was the goals were all really good, and it was all a very sort of vintage performance that we'd come to expect from Norwich, and that run, which I actually wrongly called an 11-match unbeaten streak. It was actually 13 or 14 unbeaten, which was ridiculous. And your mate bringing up the fact that Norwich weren't out of...
I'll find it afterwards.
You'll find it afterwards. We'll get it up on the screen.
It exists. I'm not a liar, I promise.
Is it on WhatsApp? Because if it's on WhatsApp, you can do the little word search.
It's on iMessage. I tried to word search it in iMessage, but there we go.
Well, you win some, you lose some. Or if you're in Norwich, you keep winning and then don't stop until you get in the Premier League. Then you start losing again. Do you know what? That actually begs an interesting question before I think we wrap up on two final points. Those points being the Bournemouth and Watford losses. I'm not talking about significance for them. I'm just interested into your insight and how you view them.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, exactly. And then Buendia as well, and maybe the comparison with him and Ivan Toney for Player of the Season. But before we speak about that, I want to ask you, this is a very big question, very interesting one. How do Norwich go about getting back and adjusting to what will be losing regularly in the Premier League? And when I say regularly, I don't mean every single game. I mean going from being a team who everyone sets up to defend against, winning towards the back end of the season very comfortably. How do you go about that sort of adjustment period?
I don't know. And that's why Stuart Webber gets paid lots and lots of money, I guess. What we do, I can tell you what I think they'll do. I can't tell you whether I think it's going to work. I think that they will sell the right back, try their damnedest to keep hold of Buendia, and I think you'll see they'll break their transfer record more than once in the summer.
You'd hope so, wouldn't you? You'd really hope so.
Well, it would beg the question, and I think Stuart Webber's fantastic, but if Norwich were to be relegated next season and Stuart Webber were to leave after his 5 years, it's quite binary this now, isn't it? It's if they finish 15th, Webber goes off into the sunset and everyone says, magnificent, incredible. Whereas if they go down, you are going to get Norwich fans who are going to kind of rightly say, okay, you came in here. Yes, it was the last parachute payment season and there was the most incredible recruitment then thereafter. But if they come back down, it's essentially the same starting point in terms of the pyramid, obviously with a lot healthier, chalk and cheese, hugely. It'll be another year one parachute payment plus a decent squad and the things you've mentioned on contracts, players who are already out on loan at other clubs, increasing their own value and training ground and all of that good stuff. But yeah, I suspect they're going to play the same type of football. And it's just I think it's just some recruitment. And I think Mr. Farker deserves some good players. Not saying that they haven't had good players, but, and I'll say this vaguely tongue in cheek, vaguely poking the bear, is that, is Stuart Webber still dining out a little bit off that incredible recruitment where, because let's be honest, this team that's been promoted is still built on Krull, Aarons, Buendia, Pukki. Cantwell's come through. He was already there, but central midfield, gonna get Skip? Probably not. Left back might have got that sorted. Like you said, centre halves, okay, Gibson's probably Premier League ready and that could be completed. But we now need to see from a Norwich perspective, Stuart Webber proved that he can have a really good window at elite level rather than, and it's funny, Ben, I did a top 20 best signings of the championship season. So not loan signings. I didn't have a Norwich player in the top 20 because the team is okay. Signed Hugill.
Did Ben Gibson not make it in your list?
Dell. I didn't class him as a full-time. I put him in the loan.
Do you know what? I'd forgotten. That's fair enough.
Because he's not a. I had Skip. Skip was number one in the loans, and I think I had Gibson. I don't know, 16 or something in the loans because he didn't play the whole season or what have you. But I didn't have a Norwich player in the best signings, and that kind of shows that the squad was already there, and he needs to go again. Do you want me to answer about Bournemouth and Watford and Toney and Buendia?
Yes, please. You seem keen to absolutely take it away.
So I guess you were asking me that they didn't have a good record against the other two year one parachute teams, and was that
it was more the promotion hangover. It's the promotion hangover. You can answer that one as well. I think do you know what? I'll be somewhat arrogant isn't the right word. People who have something that floats and produces sort of thoughts between their ears will realise that It's nothing to be worried about losing to Bournemouth and Watford. I get so frustrated.
After you've been promoted,
After you get promoted. Because the key word, Ben, context. Context is such an important thing. And it was, for example, you've got Watford, the best defensive record in the league, 2 days preparation, best home team, just like on a rampage as well, weren't they? I think they'd won, maybe 9 or 8 in a row?
And Ben, we said earlier in the podcast that the first Bournemouth game in September was the turning point.
Yep.
So you've lost away at Bournemouth and then the turning point. Everyone lost to Watford, okay, except QPR and Cardiff. Watford got 59 points. 59. They'd been halfway up the table if they'd not even got on the bus for an away game. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Look, we spoke about this on the last podcast as well. Norwich fans have had, and I think we termed it, don't want to upset anyone, a bit of an identity issue about what is this? You know, am I a smug fan in the Championship? Am I, you know, are we going to be self-funded Norwich the second promotion happens, and now we're the underdogs all over? What is this? And I just sense it felt a bit anticlimactic, didn't it, for Norwich fans? You know, they're saying we're promoted and there's still 5 games to go, and the intensity just dropped off. I wouldn't read too much into it, and I suspect it will be a different looking team in the Premier League. On Buendia and Tony, and let's be honest, we're talking about exceptional versus outstanding, or absolutely brilliant versus absolutely brilliant. Both incredible. I had Buendia as the player of the season. And I'll use the term again, just carrying a promotion on his back, just setting the standards. And I mentioned that Derby game again. And obviously the stadium's empty and you can hear everything they're saying, right? And bear in mind, I support a football team where we've had players that have carried the standards, and we've not had those players recently. And you can see them on the pitch, right? Ball into the channel. Ben Gibson runs over into the channel. Striker, whoever it is for Derby, runs in with him. Emi Buendia's on the touchline. Ben Gibson knocks the ball out for a throw-in, okay? So football fans would applaud that, yeah? Emi Buendia, this was Ben Gibson's debut. He's played in the Premier League. He's a 15 million quid player. Emi Buendia gave Ben Gibson the biggest chewing out I have ever seen for not controlling the ball, passing it back to Krul and keeping the possession cycle going. He absolutely lit the guy up. So when you talk about, and Ipswich had a player called Jim Magilton who he must have been horrible to play, just screaming at everybody all game, but he could back it up when he got the ball. And I looked at that and I thought, oh, standards. Okay, we can see it's not good enough to kick the ball in the crowd. Whereas a lot of players at that level would be applauded for doing that. And I found that very, very revealing that was the standard that was being set, whether it was from Buendia on the pitch or Farker on the sideline and the technical box. But I found that very revealing, that one moment.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and the word there, standards. You know, Buendia is ridiculous, and I've been very vocal about this. Not the only one, won't be the last. The best player I've seen play for Norwich. It's ridiculous. And as you said, if he's ever in the Championship again, there needs to be a serious discussion with either him, his agent, or just anyone, really, just questioning what on earth is going on. Ben, it's been a pleasure to relive this season with you, and a lot of the stuff you've said I definitely agree with, and it's really interesting to see how this season was perceived, and it's all about expectation and reality, isn't it? I'm going to whip out that phrase time and time again. Beyond Norfolk, it was Norwich have to win the league, they should win the league. From within, it was, will they? They did. They're going back.
Nervous energy, though, Ben. That paranoia. Yeah. You don't have that. Look, okay. There's probably some sort of Schadenfreude because we know what other football supporters are like, don't we? There's a certain amount of right. If I sit here now at the start of the season and say Norwich, they should be getting 90 points and they don't. I can sit here and go. So you get a certain amount of that from other fans. But I said it to you on the pre-season. I picked out 5 names: Webber, Farker, Aarons, Buendia, Pukki. I said if they keep 3 of them, they'll go up. They kept all 5.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what? You've made the pre-season pods a lot easier in terms of how do Norwich City stay up. It's all in recruitment. As you said, Stuart Webber has a personal point to prove. We know what a sort of a proud man he is. He doesn't show it, but if he's not, then for what it's worth, I think on the inside he has that sort of sense of competition, but on the outside he's very composed, isn't he?
Can I ask you then, Ben?
Yes.
So this squad at the moment, which players that have played this season for Norwich would you A, like the team to be built around, or probably more realistically, B, would you expect the team to be built around next season?
Cantwell, Buendia. I want to say Yanulis because I think he's going to be really important for Norwich, and maybe, and this is out there a bit, I don't know if it's out there or not, Jacob Sorensen. They're the 4 that I'll pick out.
Central midfield?
In central midfield,
that'd be interesting.
Because I think he is it. I think he will be it. And you don't replace Ollie Skipp. Like, Ollie Skipp's irreplaceable.
Yeah, he's excellent. Yeah, good
he
player.
is. But, Norwich have done it in the past where they've brought in a new body to sort of replace someone and it's gone well. Or they've looked internally. You look at James Maddison, for example, sort of coming through the ranks. He was bought, a year or 2 before he actually came through. And I think Jacob Sorensen is an example of that. We've seen flashes of excellence this season. So they're the 4 I'd pick out for you. I don't know who else
I agree with you about Janulis because they're all in on him. You don't spend
I love him. Really
that money on a fullback. I would include Gibson in that.
I was a bit worried because of the age. I would have thrown him in there, but I think we're talking he's at the up end of his peak now. So I don't know whether you, with this whole sort of sustainable model, I don't know whether you look below sort of 25.
I say that though, Ben. You don't sign someone and then bomb them out. It's exactly what Fulham did with Knockout. They loaned him straight out to Nottingham Forest the second they got promoted. So you have, although I would suggest Norwich's recruitment has been a tad more. What's the word?
Thought out.
Less ostentatious than Fulham's at times. And Fulham's has been very good, but a little bit more risky, I think, at times. But yeah, good luck to Norwich. And there's a lot systematic about football that people don't like, that is not Norwich's fault, that Norwich have become emblematic for. And I think to get that name out of people's mouths in terms of yo-yoing, in terms of parachute dominance, it would do football good if they stayed up. Do you know what I mean? Because my West Brom friends are getting fed up now at the moment that they're down. And what am I sitting there saying? Keep Pereira, keep Allardyce. It's exactly what Norwich did with Farker and Buendia.
Yeah.
He'll dominate and 90 points incoming. But people want to see a more competitive championship, and they want to see the teams that go up have a chance in the Premier League. But this is a long conversation about cliff edges between Champions League money and Premier League money, upper Premier League, bottom Premier League, parachute. We just need that scale to slide a bit more, and then teams like Norwich can go up and not think like they did last time, well, let's play the long game here and let's take the L and come back stronger. No, you want to see teams go up and be able to have a go without fear of 10 years of recriminations afterwards because they dared to spend some money in the Premier League. So don't hate the player, hate the game. And good. No, seriously, because
you're spot on. Hate the system.
I talk to a lot of Norwich fans, and I think Norwich fans mischaracterise me sometimes when I'm moaning about parachute payments. I'm moaning at the Premier League, not at Norwich or at Watford or at Bournemouth. It's not binary. It's not. If I were running a football club, I would do exactly what Norwich have done, because you make the system work for you, don't you? And you don't take risks. And obviously they've earned that money from the brilliant promotion in 1819, didn't they? But it's not binary. It's not, oh, we either ban them or we don't, or, oh, well, so-and-so got promoted without them, so everything's okay. I get a bit of cognitive dissonance from Norwich fans where they're not being truly honest with themselves. And perhaps it should be don't hate the player, hate the game. Norwich played a hand that they're dealt, and they played it damn well, and they have done for the best part of certainly the Webber era, and even before then, they've been ruthless at second-tier level. So good luck, and honestly, it would be good for football if they were to stay up and we didn't have teams that were in this purgatory in between that is not Norwich's fault and is brought about by cliff edges in wealth distribution that I will now stop banging on about.
Yeah, it's difficult not to speak about it sometimes, isn't it? I went on a podcast with Connor. It was Terrace Talk before we played Reading and won 4-1, and he was like, should more teams copy Norwich's style? And I was like, or clubs, and I was like, yeah, will they?
Probably do you want to get 97 points?
Well, that as well. Yeah, do you know what? That's a very good point. I should have said yes to that. But it's the model, isn't it? And I said, yeah, will they? I don't know, because there's this hesitance towards it. I mean, the results are there to see. There are many case studies of teams splashing the cash and it not working. Football is a funny old game, and we'll be talking about it until the end of time, won't we? Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure. Now, do you want to plug anything? Have you got anything sort of coming up that you'd like to sort of maybe point the viewers in the direction of?
I mean, this would be totally off Norwich fans' radar, but we have a 5-game slugfest at the end of the season here called the Playoffs, which we're going to be going heavy on. So it's the Benjamin Bloom Football Channel. We'll be doing the playoffs, but for Norwich fans specifically, Ben, because we spent the whole season engaging with fans on the channel in the Championship, and then if these teams get promoted, we make a lot of friends and then off they go. We do a show called Dearly Departed, which is going to be a lot of fun because it's going to be Villa, Leeds, Norwich, Watford, and one of Brentford, Barnsley, Bournemouth or Swansea. And we know Villa fans and Leeds fans like to needle each other, and we know Norwich fans and Leeds fans like to needle each other. So yeah, that could be a fun. But yeah, do subscribe to the channel. We try and keep it balanced, and I don't want to say mature because it's not immature to have emotion about a team and want them to win, but I'm not going to be sitting there being a cheerleader for Norwich. I'll call it right down the middle. I have been a cheerleader for Norwich because they've been so good in the Championship. But yeah, if you want a different context to your Norwich coverage, it will be in the context of teams that have been in the Championship recently, and that's why it's the Dearly Departed, and some quite high standards set by Leeds and Villa this season, who are going to finish halfway up as well. So it might be something to look at in respects of what's the play to get halfway up the table.
Yeah, I'll definitely be tuning into some of them playoff streams. My prediction for the winners of the playoff: Bournemouth. Who do I want to win? Barnsley. Keep that nice and simple. I think we're all Barnsley, aren't we? We're all Barnsley.
Again, talking about wealth inequality in football, it would be brilliant if Barnsley went from League One to Premier League in 2 seasons in the FFP.
We've seen it before. Well, not in the same era, but we've seen
not since the 14-15. Yeah, we've seen. Well, Norwich did it in 09-10. Yeah. Southampton. Oh, you mentioned him, didn't you? Southampton.
Oh, I'm fine with it. There's no bitterness from me.
Oh no, it's bitterness
maybe
from me now.
I didn't think about this.
Such a dreadful Ipswich manager, but there you go. He certainly sullied his reputation with both clubs now, hasn't he? But in the late 90s, Watford did it with Graham Taylor, and Man City did it with Joe Royle as well. The double promotion. Hard old slog nowadays, Ben. So yeah, if Barnsley were to do it, especially playing the way they play, where they just don't care, do they?
Yeah, we saw it in the last day of the season that they all run at you until you back off into a corner.
Back three just stands on the halfway line, and I saw the couple of Norwich goals, and I'm like, what are you doing, Barnsley? You just don't. You've given Max Aarons like the entire half of the pitch. But Ben, you know they'll go to Man City on the first day of the season and play exactly like that, and either win 2-0 or lose 8-0 or something.
I absolutely love their manager. I love him to pieces. He does it the right way, and as you said, it's just a case of all right, let's have a go then. And as you said, the centre backs on halfway, they say, well, we'll come and have a go then. And very few teams have had success against it, which is why they're in the playoffs. Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure. I have no doubt I'll see you in a couple of years' time when we come to review another Championship season for Norwich.
Stop it. But that would be without Webber as well, so you do not want that. But no, good luck. And like I said, it'd be it'd be good for the yo-yo naysayers if you did stay up. I think I think we want to see a more, sort of sliding scale rather than as binary as it has been for Norwich and West Brom and Fulham over the last few years.
Yeah, it'll be a goodbye and hopefully not see you later. Fingers crossed for that.
Unless it's on the Dearly Departed show.
It is, yeah, exactly. Well, beyond there, it's a see you not very later, hopefully. For those watching, we've got some more sort of podcast goodness coming up before we wrap the season up with a nice pretty bow and leave it to sort of sit as a happy memory. That's all to come. I hope you've enjoyed this little series where, as I said at the beginning, we're just reliving such a beautiful season. Sadly, we couldn't be there. At this point, I couldn't care less. Norwich have won the title. We're back in the Premier League. So until next time, we'll see you again very, very soon.